Welcome to the Swedish television, to SVT in Malmö. I'm so happy that we could conquer with the sunshine on the beautiful wooden porch outside. And SVT in Malmö today is not just the sunniest TV station in Sweden, I think. We're also the largest TV station outside Stockholm, and we produce all kinds of programs. Everything from news, current affairs, investigative journalism, to big events, comedy, and entertainment programs. And our ambition is that in every program we produce, we hope that everyone will find something relevant, something to learn from or be inspired by. And SVT is, together with the Swedish radio, the public service radio station in Sweden, the most trusted Swedish media. And we know through different surveys that are done that we are also the most important source of information for the majority of the Swedish people. So, television with good stories can actually be used to increase understanding among people. And that is what we strive for, and that is also why this conference is important. Because this afternoon we're hosting, at least in my opinion, one of the most interesting side events to the conference. And it's a seminar that we are calling Bridging the Gap Between Technology and Storytelling. And why is that? Because the interest in moving images is exploding. More and more people, companies, and organizations communicate through moving images today. And the new technology makes it possible for everyone to be both storytellers and publishers. And that challenges us, how we tell our stories and how we communicate. The meeting between technology, storytelling, and content changed the way we interact with our audience. And the first speaker this afternoon is Jan Helin, our newly appointed program director at SVT. And he will talk a bit about, and he will tell us about the changing media landscape and the possibilities and challenges that follows. But a two-way communication, I think, is always more interesting than a one-way communication. So please feel free to ask questions in the end of Jan's speech, and also throughout the afternoon. And I think we do it a simple way. So if you have a question, you raise your hand, and I will repeat your question in the microphone. So we do it simple and easy. We don't run around with any microphone, so don't hesitate. And if you have any questions about SVT in general, you can ask them to Emma Kronqvist, who is here somewhere. Emma is here. She is the head of SVT Malmö, and she's also responsible for this event. So she can ask any general questions about SVT throughout the afternoon. Hopefully. Depends on your questions, yes. So the stage is all yours. Jan Helin.
Thank you very much. As Ann told you, I'm newly appointed, so my plan is not to talk so much about SVT, although I'm happy to take questions about SVT, but make a few reflections on what will add up in a point that I think can be relevant. And if I'm not relevant, Ann has also promised, then I will disrupt you. But my point is a defining moment for publishing, and I really mean a defining moment for publishing industry as we know it. And I'm going to do that by reflecting on two basic fundamentals that could be said to constitute the internet, and some mistakes that were made from the publishing industry by not realizing. I would like to start off here by showing you one of the most beautiful sights you can see. You can see this in southern Sweden, you can see this in Provence, in France, you can see it in Ireland and in Scotland, anywhere where the landscape is really flat. By the beginning of fall, the starlings starts to go in enormous swirls. This has puzzled the science for ages and ages and ages. It was not until the beginning of this year, or maybe last year, that the scientists started to ask questions, how do they do this? No one really knows why they do this. But now we know how they do it. They first tried to say, who's leading this? And they found no one is really leading this. What's the purpose of this? No one really knows. But now we knew one thing. They are able to do this because they are completely obsessed by only one thing: the relation to your fellow starling. They are not so complicated when it comes to relations, so they narrow that down to 3.2 inches. It can never, ever be more than 3.2 inches to the next starling. Then this will work. But this makes the starling one of the most agile species on Earth. They are extremely good at detecting risks by this. If there's a risk, you get 1 million starlings going in one direction in the blink of a second. And they are really good at finding food. This, as you understand, should land in something that I said in the beginning. How does this apply to the internet? Well, it's quite easy. If we look at the most agile operation on internet in the world, in the history of internet, this is exactly what Facebook is obsessed by. They are obsessed by the relation between their users and whatever enhances that relation. They are not obsessed by journalism or by us sharing pictures of barbecuing or whatnot. They are obsessed by what enhances our relation. And furthermore, they are also obsessed by, which I think Emil from Neo4j will talk in much more detail about, they are also obsessed by the data points that we generate. What are the relations between those data points? The publishing industry tends to be obsessed by data like, this is all the 35-year-old women in the world. And then we put them in one column. And then we put the men in another column. And we are not really interested in what are the relations in their behavior. So that was a huge mistake. That was the first big mistake that the media industry did when digitalization hit. We were not obsessed by the relations and what that meant to the publishing industry. We basically saw internet as another form of distribution. Big mistake. Or I would say a historical mistake, if you're a publishing company that wants to transform. We were not obsessed by this. Second point that this leads to, another reflection, really basic on the internet, is this. This is really a crash course in data analysis. Data analysis is basically about answering a number of very simple questions. How many users do we have? How often do they use us? How long time do they use us? When do they use us? Who is using us? What are the user's interests? Where is the user right now? What do the user want right now? This is a very simple way of putting the fundamentals of data analysis. The interesting thing is that we are not, this is like for kids, data analysis for kids. But if you put the more common terms that you are used to this, you will find that reach, frequency, time spent, day data, ID data, interest data, geo data, intent data, all the terms that we are familiar with when it comes to the mythical stuff like big data analysis. This is what it's all about. It's basically about those questions. But we can name those questions to different data points. And the internet basically has moved for the last 10 or 15 years in 3 paradigms. The first paradigm is the blue thing here. It's basically about information. It was a mess or a cluster of information that you tried to sort out. And the data you can get out of that when it comes to the users was basically how, when, and how many. That was internet up until maybe 2003, 2004. Then the next big paradigm that all became obsessed by was this, identity. Who is using us? Who is our users? Back in the blue days, you used to say no one on internet knows you're a dog. In the red area, everyone knows you're a dog, or everyone knows who you are on internet. So that was basically identity. Up until 2 years ago, that could be debatable when that really happens. The next big thing and the most important thing is intentions. The top question there, what do the user want right now? If you can answer that question, you're way ahead of the rest. Unfortunately, the publishing industry didn't realize this either. We were completely obsessed by reach. How many? How many? How many? We are the biggest. How many? And how often do they use us? And then we stopped moving up the ladder. While the most impressive internet operations today are obsessed by what do the user want right now. There are some ways of finding that out. And I'm going to give you another crash course for my former employee, Schibsted, how they managed it, because they drew the conclusion, or I did the conclusion for Schibsted, that the problem with publishing companies is they're never going to realize this. There's no way in hell. We're still going to look at the internet as a distribution machine, and we're still going to see journalists still wants to have more and more and more readers. We're not able to move that culture, so we need to build another strategy. We built this strategy, in short, where we said that you can have in a digital ecosystem, another buzzword, but I'm going to explain it for you. In a digital ecosystems, you can have different roles if you are all connected by the same data management platform. You need to structure data. The data needs to flow in one place where you can handle it. So that's what we did. So Reach Machine, we said Aftonbladet, which is my former newspaper. It's not the most trusted news source in Sweden, but it's by far the largest and the most frequently used. So Aftonbladet's role in this ecosystem is just pull the audience in. Use the pull effect of publishing to draw the audience in. Don't bother about the other things, because you will never crack it. There are better people in the Schibsted system to crack that code than the people at Aftonbladet. But just keep the audience coming, and we will take care of the rest. Blocket is a classified operation that sells used stuff. They are really good at what media companies, we're not even on the second ladder, the identity. We don't really know how the user are. Blocket is really good at getting the user to sign in, the key to finding out who the user is. So that's basically Blocket's role, and they have certainly more role in the data field, but they are really good at making people sign up. And of course, if you use Blocket, the chance that you use Aftonbladet is almost 100%. Quantity data is more of a quality newspaper, traditionally as Swedish Daily. They are not into niche data. They like to think of themselves as a niche data provider, but they are really a quantity data provider. They are good at saying that this bulk of people are really interested in economy. That's not really an interesting data point, but the massive amount of that data is interesting if you have an ecosystem. But they are not really good at what they think they are, namely niche data. A player like Compricer, which has a comparison site for using insurance or getting the best online deal or whatnot, they are extremely good at niche data. Let me give you an example which involves Blocket, and it's an authentic example of how this works. The difference between niche data and a Reach Machine that just produces basically inventory for advertising. We now have this 35-year-old woman into the system. Aftonbladet pulls her in. She hasn't logged in yet, but it's basically data analyzed. We need like 200 data points, so we can, by 80% certainty, say that this is a 35-year-old lady. She lives here and there in Sweden. Basic data. The interesting thing is when this lady starts to look at baby strollers on Blocket. That's an interesting data point. That's a really profile data point. And if you wonder why, I can tell you that an advertiser like Volvo, they know this much about humankind. When you're about to choose a car, you want to do that yourself when you're a young male. Problem is you don't have any money, so you're not an interested target group. And then when you start getting into family situations, you're not the decision maker anymore for what car you should have. It's going to be the woman in the family who is the decision maker. When you get old, again, of course, then you're going to say, now I'm going to have my own car. But it's not going to be a Volvo. It's going to be some German, with a star on it or something. So for Volvo, the 35-year-old woman searching for a baby stroller is a really interesting data point, and that's the one she wants to target. And Volvo doesn't pay twice as much for this contact. They pay 120 times as much for that contact. If we can follow her back, because when she's looking for baby strollers, that's not a good time to get her. But when she's reading about her favorite sports on Aftonbladet, that's a good inventory to dress with this intentional data. So to sum this up, what this is all about, this ecosystem is basically all about, it's create a premium inventory by the pull effect of publishing. Remember, pull the audience in and combine it with intent data from the ecosystem. And in Schibsted's case, this intent data is generated by for instance, a classified site. If you think that's too long of a sentence, just remember this. Combine premium inventory with intent data. That's the name of the game. That's what the big players are doing. And I'm going to show you a quick way of how to do it. Let's look at Google, for instance. Remember now, premium inventory. That's like what publishers produce, and intent data. Now, Google has the most massive amount of intent data in the world, not by classified ads, but if you track me, for instance, a monkey for a data analyst could figure out that if we are going to sell stereo amplifiers to this guy, Google can tell you that by just tracing what I've searched on for the last 2 weeks. That's not complicated, but they have massive amounts of this intentional data. So they say to publishers, skip your own advertising platform. We are way ahead of you. We're driving in eighths around you. Forget it. Let us use DoubleClick. This is the icon for DoubleClick. Use DoubleClick. Put your inventory. We dress your inventory with our intent data. That's basically Google's proposition to publishers today. And of course, they want a small cut, like 45 or 50% out of your revenue. So there's a small catch. and of course, they're going to end up owning the relation to your customers. So that's a problem. Google, though, doesn't have any inventory. They're working on it. This is a short introduction of AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, which is basically a way to get in premium inventory that we as publishers going to be, we need to be where the people are, and the people are somewhere else than us. So we're going to put our inventory on, we're going to put our content on Google's AMP. They did this, of course, because the biggest guy on the block is Facebook. And Facebook has figured this out years ago, I would say, with products like Instant Article, where they say, you're way too slow. Don't put a link on Facebook. Put your content directly on Facebook. And everyone says, that's smart, because then it's quicker and it's better for the user. Problem with that is you lose the only thing of value that you have, your relation with the user. You're giving your relation with your user to an algorithm that you don't own, don't understand, and don't control. And of course, that's what Facebook wants. We are now closing into what will be a defining moment for publishing, but we're going to go do a brief study first in human behavior before I conclude in that. But this is the reason why Facebook is obsessed by live coverage, by Instant Article, by Notify, and the most recent development is a new paradigm, really. They say apps might not be the thing, it's probably bots. So they released in April of this year the first news bot ever in the Messenger system. Basically an algorithm that feeds you the news that you ask it for, instead of the algorithm figuring out what you're interested in. And all, of course, is about getting the grip of the relation to the user. Intent data is really Facebook's only weakness. It's Facebook's only weakness in the whole world, and they don't have much intent data. They are extremely good at segmenting. They can segment down to people with short noses or black hair or whatnot, but they cannot really figure out what do the user want right now. So this is one of the only weak spots on Facebook, but they're working on it. This is a screenshot from Melbourne. If you want to understand Facebook, look what they're doing in Australia. It's very often their sort of launch ground for new inventions, and this is less than a year ago. They start with local markets. So this would be to get the intentional data in with getting classified in the Facebook context. So if you magnify this, you see they have local markets and a news feed just the thumb grip away. And of course, if you're Schibsted, this is a bit shaky. The news feed in local markets in one and the same app. But I left Schibsted, so now instead I'm going to talk to end up this with some human behaviors and answer the question, okay, we now do understand that it's all about understanding what the user wants right now. But why are the social media, these 5 social media is the result you get if you ask Swedish people between the age of 17 and 23, what are your most important sources of information? End of question. It's not on the internet, or it's not. What is your most important sources of information? These 5 will come up. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, and then Spotify. If you ask him for news, Aftonbladet will come up, no one else. So it's good to be trusted. It's a problem if people don't find you. But these are the 5, and they are all. We know this. These players are all obsessed by news. All of a sudden, I mean, my business was supposed to be dead, and all of a sudden, the biggest players in the world are completely obsessed by news. Facebook, you all know, Instagram has 250 different startups that they give unique tools to get news onto the platform. Snapchat is doing not only funny mustaches and you share stuff. They are the most, I think, advanced player in packaging video for mobile today, and they're doing it with CNN, they're doing it with the BBC, they're doing it with all the big news players. Google, 27,000 news channels on every language, on every topic you can imagine. And Spotify, when they launched their video project, almost half of the TV channels that they are packaging are news. So why are they all obsessed by news? I'm going to do a really quick rundown in 5 human behaviors that will explain this. But we need to take a step back and understand what are these behaviors. The first behavior is, if we forget the words there, say you are bored. You need a break, you are bored. You're waiting for the bus, or you're inside a waiting room. And if we see the characteristic of this content, it's quite interesting. I'm going to make those meters go. So you see the time spent on this type of content, you can figure what this content is. It's a funny cat, it's a cute baby, whatever. The time spent on this will be really short. Once you're not bored anymore, its job is done. The audience, though, is huge. It's the largest possible audience that you can get for any content, because we all get bored. We don't say, this is like in Sweden, at least, we had this old saying that you read the gossip magazines when you were at the hairdresser. This is the same thing. No one watched funny cats, of course, but it's the most shared, most watched content ever produced in human mankind. So someone is watching it. And so this is basically a human behavior. The predictability, this is one of the problems with this. Predictability is low. It's really hard to tell when do people get bored. We don't know. The commitment to this is the big problem if you plan to advertise. You don't really care what this content comes from. It's not interesting if it's a Facebook distributed content, or if it's my friend, or if it's a media company. If I'm not bored anymore, it's good. I don't care. And the patience of this is really low. You can't pull people in and expect them to stay. They will jump until they are not bored anymore. So that's the first basic thing. Now the update. This is the human behavior of wanting to know what's happening in the world. And now the journalist starts waking up and saying, this is content. This is something else than just not being bored anymore. Problem is, if you watch those meters, this content behaves in the exact same way as if you are bored. So that's a problem with breaking news content. It will not get people to stay. The commitment will be low, the patience will be low, and the time spent is really low. When you're updated, you do something else. So this is a big problem for if you only want to go to the breaking news. The lookup, it gets better for the journalists. The lookup is when you already know something and wants to understand what you just heard. Then you go to a source that, well, this is SVT's stronghold. Not so good in the breaking news part yet, but we will be, but not yet.
You say SVT.
No, yeah. Yes, I'm trying to be opartisk and saklig in Swedish. I don't know the translation for that. It should be okay. The lookup, the time spent goes up. The audience, though, of course, goes down. We're now moving shortly. We move into really niche. The predictability of this is also hard. It's more depending to research. If you're what situation you are in than who you are, what you want to know more about. It's more situation related than we think. So that's one problem with this content. The commitment is really high. If you have decided to find something out, you will not stop until you have found it out. And the patience, therefore, is also quite high. The story and the passion, this is where every journalist wants to be and very few are. Because this demands that you're a subject. You need to step forward and tell a story and say, I am engaged in this because of this and that. This is quite the opposite of being opartisk och saklig. This is an angle on things. It could really be sakligt anyway, but it requires a narrator that will engage you. Time spent here is really long. The audience, now we are into niche. If you're interested in motorbikes, you're here. And you will be predictable, because if you're interested, sooner or later you will look this content up. If you're interested in gardening, you will come here. So classic niche interests. If you're interested in macroeconomy, The Economist excels in this, just to name a title, the story and passion. If you're really interested in macroeconomy, and unfortunately most people like to say that they are, but they aren't really, and therefore they find The Economist really boring. But if you are really interested in it, they will deliver on this. They are really good at it. So the commitment is high and the patience is high. The last human behavior is the recline. We now lean back, and this is of course from a TV angle. This is the only really human behavior that TV has catered for. You lean back and you have something stream to you. You don't want to choose. You just want it to come. Some of the most fun mistakes were made in this field of human behavior when the digitalization first broke. You remember probably all of a sudden you can see a movie, and then now you can decide for yourself how the movie will end. And you will go like, come on, I'm lying here, I want to just tell me the goddamn story. I don't want to choose. It's because you're in this mode. You do not want to choose here. So time spent here, this is the interesting thing. Time spent here is really long. And what's the problem with TV? The audience is this is a human behavior that it's as strong as being bored. We spend 2 to 3 hours a day, depending on what culture we're from, to recline. So this is a really huge human behavior. Problem is this: the predictability is low. You know, maybe they are not the best brains in the world, but they are certainly among the most well-paid brains in the world in Hollywood. They're trying to figure this out all the time. And on an average, they manage 7 to 8 times a year. They have a real blockbuster. 7 to 8 times a year, they crack it. And their mistakes are hugely costly. They cost so much money. So this is the problem with television content, that the failure is so expensive. So a lot of the commercial TV stations, they do, maybe you have noticed, they tend to do the same shows over and over and over and over again, because you can more or less calculate how bad or good it will go. The commitment is high and the patience is quite low. You need almost a recommendation to stay here. If we map these behaviors out, we are now starting to close in on the question, why are the social media obsessed by news and by journalism? They start here in the break. Basically, all social media start here. They are good at catering for, I'm bored, let's go somewhere else. But if they want to do business, and believe me, they are pretty good at it, they have moved, you need to go into the other territories. You cannot just stay with content that will not keep you bored anymore. This logotype here is BuzzFeed, for instance. BuzzFeed started out with summoning their strategy in one sentence that was really cocky and cool, I think. They will say, we are bored people's network. That's what we do. we do not, we cater for that people are not bored anymore. And they did this big research, deeper than the one I showed you right now, and said there is only really two reasons why people share content at all. It's trying to look smart before your friends, or trying to be funny before your friends. That's why nude girls, page 3 in London, for instance, won't work in this. No one wants to share that. You look stupid and not so smart. But BuzzFeed figure, okay, so it's funny cats and politics. People love to share politics because you look smart. People like to share opinionated text because you look smart. You don't have to agree, but you can say this is really good or this is going to hell. So they made a site which consisted of funny cats and die-hard politic reporting. And they passed the New York Times within 18 months from their start. But now, what are they doing now? This is not enough. They don't get any business in just making people not bored anymore or look smart. So they hire one of the most competent investigative team in America. They hire foreign correspondents in every part of the world, and of course trying to move their business into these areas, the update, the lookup, and the story. And that's of course the position that a traditional primary national news source like Aftonbladet or Schibsted has. And that's of course the position that Facebook wants to take. That's why they want our content. So that's what they're doing. The recline, these are the new movers. We don't go into them specific. But let me round up and say, okay, so Facebook explains this by saying we connect people to the content and creators that best inform and entertain them. That's really interesting. It's almost like a public service statement to connect people to the content and creators. But how do they know what content best inform people And if you're not content with that answer, who do you ask at Facebook? Who's responsible for sharing what? You don't know. You don't get an answer. So I would say I would rephrase this, and to my angle on this speech, I would say this is all about a question that is almost presented to the publishing industry at gunpoint. Are you going to become a platform player or a content provider? Are you going to draw people, the audience, into your platform, or are you going to cater for content on Facebook or on Google or what platform you want? If you choose the later, the content provider, that's an easy way out, because we're not really good at, as I mentioned earlier, the relations and the data analysis. If we choose that path, we give away our relation to the user, to an algorithm that we don't see, we don't own, and we don't understand, which is going to be a huge problem, I think, for all publishing. So I would say there is an alternative way of describing Facebook, and I came to think of Lord of the Rings, one ring to rule them all. So we did this short movie and said, okay, you can describe Facebook as one app to rule them all, one app to find them, one app to bring them all in, and in the darkness, bind them. Thank you.
Do you have to choose? Do you have to choose if you want to be a platform provider or a content provider?
Yeah, I think so.
Can't you be both?
You can be both if you regard Facebook and Google as a means of marketing your content. But the point of doing that is trying to convert the user back to your platform. You might not succeed. This is really hard. I do understand this. But if you don't try, you might as well just, get your developing department quit. Don't pay for it and just be a really good content provider. And I think we're going to hear The Guardian later. I think The Guardian has huge problem with this. The Guardian has only 20% of their traffic is coming directly into The Guardian. 80% comes from social media. And The Guardian is, we all know their journalism. They're one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. Their audience is growing, but not their direct relation with their audience, which is a huge problem for the business model for The Guardian.
If we bring this back to Sweden,
yeah.
to SVT, Swedish Television, we decided not to put our material, ourselves at least, on YouTube, for example. We want people to come to play our play functions and to see it broadcasted. Is that the right decision, do you think? Is it,
it is the right decision, but we are, as all media companies are, we are schizophrenic about it, because sometimes we put a lot of stuff out on YouTube, and sometimes we don't put anything. And I think it's okay to be a bit schizophrenic about this, because no one really has the answer. It's one thing to make a point like this. It's another thing to really execute on a strategy. But I think I haven't heard any strategy that it's consistent and has a proven business model, or for public service, a proven relation with the user, which is really important, that not involves creating your own or developing your own platform.
Emil?
Love the presentation. Awesome presentation.
Thanks.
Question with two parts. 1A, can you crisply describe SVT, where SVT is and what it looks like 5 years from now? And 1B, 10 years from now.
Wow.
Did you all hear? Did you hear the question?
Yeah. I think 5 years from now, SVT will have found the place in the lookup area. I think that's an extremely publishing role for publishing within SVT, within the news, explaining the news. That's the position. We need to be good at breaking news, but I think there will be players that is always a bit faster of breaking the news than SVT. We're going to be good at that, but we're going to excel in explaining the news. And I think that's one of the most clearest public service mission you can think of. When it comes to the program part, still on 1A, I think SVT Play is doing a really good job. They were early out. What we need to figure out, and has figured out in 5 years, is how do you know that the material is presented on SVT Play? To be honest today, you know what's the curation on SVT Play. You basically understand that by what's being broadcasted. Which actually is not a bad thing right now, because that gives SVT Play a unique position besides of Netflix and HBO. We can't compete with Netflix in the way Netflix do it, because they have like 10 times or 100 times more content, and their personalization algorithms are way They are so good that if SVT did something like that, you can really ask, is that really a role of public service to personalize the content? So you would have problems either way. So for the time being, I think SVT we're doing it right, but in 5 years we need to be much clearer on how do I understand what's on SVT Play. So that's going to be a big problem to solve. In 10 years, someone told me, we will never make a drama series like The Bridge and then put it all out for binge watching. I would say in 10 years we will do a drama series like The Bridge and put it all out for binge watching. So I think that's inevitable. The behavior is driving towards that way. You need to do it, but not right now actually, because right now the biggest conversion engine for SVT into an online world is broadcast. It's by far the most effective conversion engine.
I have one more question. I said SVT is the most trusted media together with SR today.
Yeah.
And you said it's good to be trusted, but it's bad if they don't find you.
Yeah.
How will we make young people find us? Because we're really losing a generation, or on our way to lose a generation here.
I think trust is in the core of public service. You need to be trusted. If you're a commercial news operation, you don't need that. It could be nice to have, to stop having the public service people picking on you on seminars like this, but it's not really a problem as long as you have the audience and as long as you engage the audience. But as a public service company, you need to have the trust in the core. And I think to reach young people, I think breaking news, as I said, it's an important part. We're going to be the best company in breaking news, absolutely. But the more important thing is to explain, to understand the news. Young people, look at all the young news outlets that don't have a legacy, like Vox or like AJ Plus or whatnot. The only thing they do is explaining the news. And they have the highest compilation of millennials that everyone tries to reach of all media companies. So it's not true that young people is not interested in the news. They are. It's just that the traditional newscasts require some in advance knowledge to understand it, and you need to change your tonality and explain the news. I think that's the way to reach a young audience, and I can see no company better fit to do that than SVT, because it's really good in moving images and has this trust. So that's why I joined.
But isn't that also a platform question? Because if they are not on our platform, don't we need to be on other platforms so they will discover us? And then can come to us.
As I
They need to discover us somewhere.
Yeah, it's okay to market yourself on social media, but you have to realize, I think this is my thesis, and a lot of people don't agree, but I think this is the distinction between marketing and publishing. When we say we need to be where the audience are, publishers has never said that. Publishers has really said we are so interested, so we're going to draw the audience to us, to here. And all of a sudden, you give up on that credo and say, we need to be where the audience are. That's marketing. That's not publishing. If you're a publisher, people will find you, but you need to market yourself to tell about yourself. But as I said, this is controversial. A lot of people don't agree. My question against it, and that's not a public service question, but it's show me the money, where no one makes money out of Facebook to such an extent that you can withhold a substantial news operation. And I think public service also need to balance the relation between the commercial media landscape. So if we were irresponsible, we would say, this is not a problem for public service. We distribute ourselves to full extent on Google and Facebook. That would be a problem, I would say, because that will damage the whole media choir in a country, and that is not in the public service interest. It's always fun if you're a publishing company to compete with others and be better than others and stuff, but it's not in the long time public service interest to kill the commercial. It's on the contrary.
We need each other, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, to make everyone better.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this crash course in the changing media landscape. And if there is no other question for Jan, he needs to take a plane back to Stockholm, so he won't be here for questions later on, but there will be several. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now it's time to learn more about the HBB TV, what it is, and how it will change the way you watch TV. We have with us here Billy Sjöberg och Jonna Hjort that comes from SVTI, SVT Interactive, and they will tell you all what you never knew you wanted to know about HBB TV. Welcome up. Thank you.
Thank you. Någon som kan lösenordet på den här? Börjar bra. Tack.
I can start out, to be honest, and say I never heard about HBB TV, and I actually work at SVT, so this is really going to be interesting to learn about, and I think one of these knowledges you can sit on at the dinner tonight and brag about. Oh, have you heard about HBB TV? Oh no, listen to this. Yeah.
Latest news.
Welcome.
Yeah. Billy and I, we work at SVT Interactive, which is a part of SVT that develops our online services. The two of us specifically work with SVT Play, which is SVT's streaming service. We're here today to talk to you about one specific platform, HBB TV, that we recently launched at, and how it may change the way we consume broadcast TV. But before we get into what HBB TV actually is and how it works, I'm going to take you on a quick journey of the history of SVT and online video. It started 20 years ago, in 1996, with a tiny pop-up player on svt.se. It was quite a slow start, but 10 years later, that pop-up player contained over 2,000 hours of video. And was branded SVT Play. In 2010, the iOS app was approved, and a year later, we also had an Android app. In 2014, we also came on board the Apple TV, pre-installed. And last year, we launched the Chromecast support for our apps. And we also launched a beta version of Android TV, which is now out in full version. So this year, we have landed in two focus areas. We are currently developing apps with native technology for Android and iOS. And we also have launched this app on Smart TV that we're here to talk to you about today. All this because we want to enhance the experience of both mobile devices and the big screen. So how are we going to do that on the big screen?
So when we first set out to build a smart TV app, we decided that we want to build it based on a standard, because the development budget at SVT is comparatively low if you compare it to, for example, Netflix and those giants. So we wanted to build on a standard, and HBB TV is the biggest one. And the idea with HBB TV is that it combines separate standards into one, and it tries to combine the linear broadcast world together with internet services. So our way of thinking was that this should be the way that we build SVT Play. It's fairly old, actually. The 1.0 version was written in 2010, and if you've been in Central Europe, you might already have used it without knowing it. But the main big selling point for us was that we could build one app and it would work on all televisions. From a technical standpoint, what happens when you start the app inside your TV is that it opens a link inside the television's internal browser, and it goes to a regular web page, sort of less. And that web page then calls back to our backend, the same one that we use for all our SVT Play services, which then provides us with the recommendation links or all the types of lists that we use that you typically see in SVT Play. And the final stage, of course, is watching the video. So this is the sneak preview of the latest app. And as you can see, the design language is use pretty big images, something that works very well for TVs. You also recognize that it's an SVT Play product. It should be very similar to the other platforms that you used. So that's what we have right now. It's a separate app. You download it, or it comes pre-installed inside your television. But we are already starting to think, how could we take this standard further? Because in HBB TV world, you talk about broadcast independent and broadcast related apps. What we have right now is a broadcast independent app. It doesn't have anything to do with the broadcasting. But the actual standard was made to enhance broadcast. So the way that works is that you have your typical broadcast signal, and then you can tie on extra signals to that, which you can feed back into your app. And the app, of course, talks with internet services the same way as a regular PC would do. So just some sort of a preview how that could work in the future. This is, again, not something that we've done currently, but this is what other HBB TV applications typically do. So you're sitting watching På spåret, a very popular Swedish game show, and you get served the video stream from the digital streaming as usual. And coupled with the video signal, you also get a signal that specifies that, hey, you should look at this URL and start the application that's running there. So you as a user hasn't done anything yet. Your TV connects to SVT backend and fetches that app. Again, just sort of like a regular web page. And a small overlay appears in the bottom of the screen saying that if you want to access SVT Play, just press the red button from here on. After that overlay has popped up, it disappears again, and now the app is actually running in the background, but you don't see it until you press the red button. Whoops, sorry. Until you press the red button. So this is where the app actually comes to the forefront. So again, this is not something that we do today. We don't have this signal yet. This is still something that we're considering. So coupled with this signal to start the app, you actually can send signals as well to the app, depending on what happens in real time during the streaming. So that's what John is going to discuss.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at what others have used HBB TV for. Here, for example, you have a talent show, sitting at home watching on the TV, and by pressing a button on your remote control, this overlay appears, and you can then vote for your favorite. And since the TV is connected to the internet, the TV show can collect the votes. BBC uses it as kind of similar to teletext, where you can browse through sport, news, weather, etc. They also uses it to for their streaming service, BBC iPlayer. So what's running in the background is the broadcast TV signal, and then while still watching it in the background, you can get an overlay and start browsing to see if there's anything you would like to watch. You can also use it with your friends sitting at home. Here we have some sort of TV show where you can compete, and you can sit with your second screen device and answer questions, and then you can see everyone's score on the TV. And HBB TV 2.0 also makes it possible for both TV and mobile devices to synchronize the playback. of several streams across the devices with an accuracy of a few milliseconds. It's therefore possible to stream to the mobile device, for example, an alternative language that's not included in the broadcast. So an end user listening on headphones can then experience a clean lip sync with the TV program. So the next steps.
So we're over right now. We're at open beta. So if you have a pretty new Panasonic TV currently, you can download the app and run it from the get-go. Of course, we want to bring as many manufacturers along, so we are waiting approvals with the other ones. From a technical standpoint, we're already ready. Now it's just legal issues. And we want to share our experiences. It's been very good working this way. The app seems to be very stable, and we hope that it will be used a lot. And of course, we will start looking into how we can connect SVT Play better together with the broadcast experience to bridge between those two worlds. So I guess that was that from us.
Is it only SVT who is experimenting with the HBB TV, or does our concurrent
In
do this as well?
Sweden, yes, as far as we know.
Yep. As I said, it's very popular in Central Europe. So if you go to, for example, Germany has a lot of stations using it already. France is also very popular in mainly Europe. I know that Denmark has started using HBB TV. They beat us, but I think in Sweden we are the first ones.
Because shouldn't we be stronger if TV4, for example,
Yeah,
or 5 and
absolutely.
3 also
Absolutely,
were with us?
and that's
a
exactly
stronger
what.
impact on the manufacturing companies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we definitely want to bring along the others as well to make this a really good standard and make it evolve.
So do you have those kind of meetings, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had some first meetings and we share experiences. So absolutely.
So if you really believe in this, how far away do you think it is until it's a standard?
It is a standard right now, and it's working, and it has matured a lot. It's started out as 1.0, 1.5, and then 2.0. So it has been in the available for quite a long time, and as far as we can tell, it works very well. And then it's of course it's a timing thing. As with all new standards, you need to start implementing them from manufacturer side as well. So you have to target the specific standard that a lot of manufacturers have implemented already. So 2.0, for example, is quite new. So if we would have gone there from the first get-go, it would probably be a little bit later on than if we go for an older standard. So,
is there any questions? Yeah, excuse me.
I was wondering, what does the process of exploring possibilities with this broadcast-related app look like for you?
So how we are going to explore how we intertwine the broadcasting world.
Yeah, so how do you explore the possibilities with this app?
Yeah. So first, of course, we need to explore it from a technical standpoint. We're pretty new to this, so we have to make sure that is it even possible, and will the signal work, and what do we do if the signal doesn't reach the end users, for example. And then, of course, we need to have the show producers being interested in this and bring a lot of interest internally as well at SVT. So
you need the content.
Yeah, exactly, the content and the ideas. So we
Yeah.
need to spread the word internally and get everyone to think that, oh, this is
not only the users and the technique, you also need the content from us,
absolutely,
so to speak. Well, I say thank you so much to Billy and Jonna, and now we know a little bit more about HBB. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And before we keep going, it's a very short break, 10 minutes break, and there is a smoothie outside. Emma, would you outside? Yes. So a short break. We see you back here in 10 minutes. Well, now we're going to talk about something that at least interests me a lot, you know, a story we all heard a lot about, but maybe didn't get all the facts about. And we're going to talk about the interaction between investigative journalism and digital technology. And we're going to do that based on the hugely influential Panama Papers project. And we're going to meet Helena Bengtsson, who is an editor for data projects at The Guardian. She used to work at the Swedish television for Uppdrag Granskning long time ago. We used to work together. And now she's been working in London for a few years with The Guardian. And you're also going to hear from Emil Eifrem, who is the founder and CEO of Neo4j, who is a technology company, you can say. And you're going to do this point together, and we start with Helena. Give them a hand.
Hello. I thought I'd very quickly just start by telling you how we work with data journalism and investigative journalism at The Guardian. And I run the data projects team. We're 3 data journalists, and we're solely focused on finding the story, doing analysis and finding the story. We very seldom do daily journalism. We do short term and we do longer terms, and sometimes we do Panama Papers, which is very long term. We also have an amazing visuals team, which is the old graphics team, I would say, that is very much enhanced with developers, with special projects editors, with journalists who do visualization, who do visual storytelling. They do simple bar graphs. They do a lot of different things. They've done amazing visualizations now for the Olympics, for instance, that you can go in and look at. We also have an investigations team, and within that team we have a couple of journalists that have some data knowledge. If we look at the Panama Papers at The Guardian, I thought that we were very privileged at The Guardian. We had a core team, about 5 journalists. We were locked into a special room and weren't allowed to get out, almost. But we also added specialists in when we needed them. So when we found that there was several sports profiles in the data, we added in a sports reporter who could write about that. When we found that there was a very strong Russian idea with a friend of Putin who takes care of Putin's money, we had one of our journalists added to the team who is an expert in Russia, and so on and so on. And in the end, when we started to get together, we slowly let people in on the secret. Nobody at The Guardian knew what we were doing. We were always talking about that we were doing the secret project, but very few people knew what we were doing. Until the end, where we put in people from the visuals team, from multimedia team, from the design team, to make sure that everything came together for the broadcast. Sorry, I've been listening to John Lean too much, for the launch. I work at the paper now. I've worked at television for 20 years. It's very hard for me to sort of not talk about viewers and broadcast and that sort of thing. But the ICIJ is the organization who ran this project, you could say. They put together 100 media companies, almost 400 journalists together from 80 countries. And that is the big thing with the Panama Papers, I think, is that we formed a real community. We had a forum, a little bit like a forum on Facebook maybe, where we shared all our data and all our findings. And that's very foreign for a journalist, especially an investigative journalist, to actually share my findings with somebody else, with another investigative journalist. But this worked really, really well. And I will say that almost any story that came out of the Panama Papers project was not a story by a single journalist. I know that the stories about the cellist who was Putin's best friend came through from journalists at The Guardian, journalists at the BBC who worked together, journalists in Germany, journalists in, and not the least, very, very brave journalists in Russia who actually helped us do this story. So it was a truly working together, and everybody, 370 journalists, kept a secret. And I think that was the big thing there. So The Guardian did a lot of stories with Panama Papers. I'm going to focus a little bit on the data and technology part of the stories. We did a lot of other stories, but one of the first things that I did was that you have to imagine that the Panama Papers, actually I would say that it is not really a database. It's a pile of documents. It has very little structure. It has a little structure, but it has very little structure. It has very different formats. It's pictures, it's PDFs, it's text documents, all in a ramble. It's like a big room full of piles of documents, more than a database. So one thing that we wanted to do was, of course, finding people in this. So how do we do that? Well, we make lists. So my first job here was to make lists. I started out by, for instance, we had to check were the members of the parliament in this, how many members of the parliament was in the Mossack Fonseca database. And when we wanted to check the House of Lords, we had to look at their actual names. So in order to do that, you have to actually click into every single page here to find that the Baroness Adams of Cralia really, her name is really Catherine Adams. But you don't see that if you look at the list of people. So I had to gather all these links and then, don't look, Emil, please. And then write a small program that actually took all, and anybody else who's a developer, please don't look. I program, but very, very badly, and in a very ancient language. So that's why they're laughing. So to draw all these information out. We did the same thing with this FIFA, for instance. We gathered all the documents, all the big shots within FIFA from several years and put them together into a list. We looked at Forbes' rich list and gathered that together. And all these lists we ran through the database to try to find stories, and could then, for instance, find most of them became single stories. I mean, Messi, the football player Messi, was of course a story of his own, but some of them were also gathered in this story, where we found members of the House of Lords, members of the House of Commons, and that sort of thing into that story. The second thing we had to do, there were a small part of the Panama Papers data. The Panama Papers data was about 11 million records, 11 million papers, documents. But a small part of it was actually a database over companies, about 200,000 companies. And we wanted to show how these where these companies came from, and who was actually, who were the, not the owners, but the intermediaries for these companies. So I took upon myself to clean up this data. And I actually did it by hand. So I went through 200,000 rows and made sure that every country was correct. And here you can see why I wanted to do it by hand and not programmatically. I wanted, of course, to keep the Jersey companies separate, because Jersey is an offshore tax haven, whereas United Kingdom is, some people claim that's also a tax haven, but not so much. So in this case, you had the words United Kingdom there, but what I really wanted to code them as was, of course, Jersey. So I went through them all. It took several weeks. Once I've done that, the ICIJ programmer called me up and said, I've actually done this programmatically in a day or two. Should we? But what happened was that we actually compared our lists. So I found the things that he had done wrong, and he found the things that I had done wrong. So it was a great collaboration in that way. And we could then do the same thing with the beneficial owners, and we could do the same thing with the intermediaries. And all this work ended up in this graphic. So we could see that the companies are incorporated in the tax havens. You have the intermediaries that create these companies for their clients, and they're usually in Switzerland and Hong Kong and in Panama. And then you have the owners, who are from all over the world. Another thing that also you have to do when you're a data journalist and you get this kind of data that is extremely unstructured is that you feel like, I have to structure some things because I love structure. So I found a small, very, very small part of it. We found that we wanted to show how the authorities in British Virgin Islands actually didn't really do their job in keeping this company, making this company pay for breaking the law, for instance. And there's a rule that says that if the officials come and ask you who is the real owner, who is the beneficial owner, a company like Mossack Fonseca has to give the answer away to the official agency. So we found a lot of letters that goes, so this is an answer to a letter coming regarding a certain company, and they are saying that in this case they're unable to tell them who the beneficial owner is, which is in this case is not so good. And I found these letters. I found about 800 of these letters, and I actually typed them in by hand. In this case, the beneficial owner is not known to us. In this case, actually, this is Alaa Mohammed Hosni Mubarak, which is a person that was on the sanctions list, and the company should really have known that they shouldn't be doing his business. And I put all this into an Excel file. So I actually sat there and read all the letters, and I searched them by writing "Dear Mr. George" into the search field, because they always started all their letters with "Dear Mr. George," and that was the easy ways to do it. And then we used this database that I collected to write the story about how the British Virgin Islands actually didn't do a good job when it came to looking at Mossack Fonseca. The last story that I wanted to talk to you about is also sort of cleaning data. The little piece of structured data that we had, the company's data, was extremely dirty. For instance, then when the company had changed their names, which they do, of course, because this is the business of, and I will say this because our lawyers told us to write this in every story, there's nothing illegal about having a company in an offshore site. But it's a secret, and they changed their names. So whenever they changed their names in the database, they just wrote the old name with an X in front of them. So that made it really hard to search and match data. So I went through this and cleaned that data up so that we had all the companies separate. I also found another data source, the land registry, the authority that registers all property sales in England and Wales, also had a database over all overseas ownership of property. So every single property that was owned by a company that didn't come from England or Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland, there was a database. So what we could do, I had to clean that up too, because land registry isn't that good at sort of keeping their data especially clean either. So I cleaned that up. I cleaned the Mossack Fonseca data up. I put them into 2 tables, and I ran a similarity search, which means that the names didn't have to be 100% the same. They could only be, in this case, 90%. So I started this matching, and then I let my computer work for 3 days. It took it 3 days to run this query. And by the end of that, I got a number of hits. We found about, I think, almost 8,000 companies that own property in England and Wales, and that was in the Mossack Fonseca database. And then, of course, we had to go through them by hand and see, is this a match or isn't this a match? And sometimes there was, and sometimes there wasn't. But we found quite a lot of stories without this. So we did a story about the secret UK property empires. And we had, as I said, a great visual department that could sort of show us all the property around, mostly London, I must say, where everything from telecom tycoons to business magnates to, of course, the royal family of the United Arab Emirates, who owns a lot of property in London, politicians and foreign officials, and made this story out of that. So that is sort of my story about mostly working with trying to structure the unstructured, and now that is sort of Emil's cue to come in and continue talking.
Can I just is it finished, the Panama paper project at The Guardian, or are you still keeping?
I think we have a couple of journalists that still. I think we published a story 2 weeks ago out of the Panama Papers, and I think that the Panama Papers is such a great resource. I did a story about a month and a half ago when I looked at also property in London and luxury. The fact that you produce so much luxury property, not really meant to live in, just meant to invest in. And I found a couple. I used the Mossack Fonseca database there, and I found a couple of the companies that own the property were, of course, in that database. So it will be used as a resource as well.
All right. Perfect. Hi, my name is Emil Eifrem, or as I can say here in Sweden, Emil Eifrem. And I'm the CEO of a technology company which actually was founded 250 meters from here at Mink in Malmö, the Malmö incubator. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the company and our involvement with investigative journalism in general, but also specifically the Panama Papers. Before that, though, just a question for the audience, just to get to know you a little bit better. How many in here are journalists or want to go into journalism? Hands raised. What's that? 30% probably, something like that. How many are, I was going to say technical, but how many here are either developer? How many here have written at least one line of code in their life? Yeah, probably 30-40%. All right, cool. I'll try to cater to both audiences, and we'll see how that goes. So a little bit about the company that I work for. The name is Neo4j, Neo4j, or Neo Technology. In a nutshell, we're about 120, 130 employees. We're the leader in graph databases, and if you don't know what that is, I will tell you a little bit more about it later. You know, our headquarters is in San Mateo, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley, which is where I live. I've lived for about 5 years now. But the engineering HQ, where the product is built, the technology built, is 200 meters from here in Malmö. We have investors, blah, blah, blah. We're in hyper-growth phase, all of that good stuff. But that's not the story that I'm going to talk to you about today. What I will tell you about is that about 15 years ago, I was working at another startup, a small startup in Sweden that you haven't heard of, and we were building content management systems. And I had a team. I was the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer, and I had a team of about 20 engineers working and building out the system. And I had a big problem because 10 of those engineers spent the vast majority of their time fighting against the database. And this was a problem and also a surprise to me because throughout my entire career, I've been very helped by the database. But it turned out that for some reason, it worked against us this time. The reason, as it turned out, was that we were working with data that had a lot of connections in it. And we worked with a database that forced all data to be put into tables, right? So basically, since the 1970s in the IT world, we've worked with only one type of databases. And it works like Excel, like what Helena showed on the screen before, which is everything is structured in rows and columns, right? Which builds up a big table, which is amazing. That is super, super good for a lot of things. But if you have a lot of data that is flexible, that is evolving, that is organic, where you ahead of time don't know the structure, or there's a lot of connections involved, then it ends up being a big problem. So 15 years ago, we took a step back and we said, okay, where the world is today, if you screw the 1970s, right? where the world is today, if you wanted to build a database from scratch with no heritage, you just ignore lessons learned from before, what would that look like? So we started to look around for inspiration. Where are we really good at working with data, even outside of IT, outside of software? And we realized that the best database in the world is actually right there. And right there, and right there, right? It's the human brain, right? At least, I mean, some notable exceptions, but in general, an amazing piece of technology for working with information. And how is the human brain structured again? Well, it has neurons, which connect to other neurons through synapses. So it builds up a big network, right? Another word for network in mathematics is graph. And what we realized was that what if you could take just a very, very simple technology, a very, very simple set of rules and abstractions, building blocks, where you say that you have nodes, you connect those nodes with relationships, and then you build out this big, what we call graph. Then you can model everything. Everything can be fit into this. You can have a small social network. This is probably too small for you to see, but this is some girl who knows some guy who knows some guy, right? A social network. You can build that with nodes and then relationship between these nodes. But you can also build it out even further, right? So you can know other people, but these people may be selling something, right? And so here we're modeling people, the friendships between them, but also tools that they own or assets that they own that they might want to sell. So here we're building up some kind of application where you have, Facebook meets a Craigslist or a Blocket, right? Like a Craigbook or FaceBlock or something like that, right? And you can super easily express that using these building blocks. So we build that out basically on a hunch, hoping that this would be better. And it turns out that once we put this in production, it is frequently 1,000 times faster or more than existing databases. Not for everything. There are some things where the tabular structures are better, like if you're building a payroll system, like a salary list. You have first name, you have last name, you have age, you have title, you have salary. That's it. Every single row looks exactly the same. It's very square and static, right? Like an accounting department. That is a great fit for a tabular database. But if you have something where the world is evolving, where it's changing, where there's lots of connections, then this technology ended up being more than 1,000 times faster. Which means that you can build this out not just with a small 5-6 node social network, but when you have billions of people connected, right? A very, very powerful platform. Looking back on the first presentation from Jan, this is the type of technology that can underpin one of these big platform providers. And in fact, if we go in and we look at Facebook, we look at Google, we look at all of these big Silicon Valley companies that Jan talked about, their underlying technology is all some kind of a graph database. The difference is that their graph database is not available for anyone, whereas the one that we built is something that you can download and use for yourself. So we see our world, sort of our mission, as taking this type of secret Silicon Valley sauce and democratize access to it. Make sure that anyone can have access to that. So that was a long time ago. Now 15 years later, it is an industry. We made up a word for this. This didn't exist before. But we said, okay, it's a graph from mathematics that existed, database, that word existed. Let's put all that together and call it a graph database, right? So we said, okay, awesome. And today, big analyst firms are saying that by 2017, 1/4 of all enterprises are going to be using this, right? Other big analyst firms, Gartner, saying that by 2018, 70% of them will be at least piloting using graph databases. Pretty amazing. In terms of us specifically, our database, it's used in a wide variety of verticals today, industries, anything from software to many big banks, 5 of the top 10 retailers of the world. I don't know what retail is in Swedish. I think it's like detaljhandel or something like that. But over 5 of the top 10 retailers, starting with Walmart, which is the Fortune 1 company, the biggest company on the planet, is using Neo4j today to do recommendations and other things like that. So wide variety of verticals, very, very cool.
So that's kind of the background of how we got started and where we are today as a company. Now, this is about digital storytelling, marrying technology and journalism. So we have kind of dabbled in this before, but it really became huge for us in conjunction with the Panama Papers. And that all got started actually quite a while ago for us, 3 or 4 years ago, something like that, when we were contacted out of the blue by an organization called the ICIJ, which Helena mentioned, the Investigative Consortium, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism. It's even up on the screen, the ICIJ. And they contacted us for something that we now know was the Swiss leaks. Who here remembers the Swiss leaks? Hand raised. A few people. It was basically a leak out of HSBC, where it got revealed that they had done a bunch of bad things, primarily out of Switzerland. I want to say that it was first broken by The Guardian. Is that true? Yeah, yeah. And it's funny because so the ICIJ contacted us and said, hey, we've been using your technology a little bit because we're open source. We don't know everyone that uses it. We've been using your technology for a little bit. We love it. We're using it through a visualization front end, and we would like some help with a few things. We're like, all right, cool. I mean, our day job is to support commercial customers, right? But we like to dabble with these kind of things because we love the kind of the political impact and the societal impact. So we said, cool, what are you working on? Nothing, right? And then we helped them out a little bit, and then after a while, Swiss leaks happened. I still had no idea that we were involved with this, or our technology was involved. And then I watched a video clip on theguardian.com. I was one of the few people who apparently went to theguardian.com and didn't watch it through Facebook. And it was like a 5-minute interview with kind of the Edward Snowden of the Swiss leaks. And it was like sitting there like with this like face hidden and talking with like a scrambled voice and whatever. And at some point, for about 2 seconds, this guy shows the technology that he used to analyze it. And I look at this, and it's like, it's our UI. It's like, wait, this is Neo4j version 1.3 or whatever it was like. And so we started talking about this internally. And then after a while, we realized that the connections were that the ICIJ were using us, and then therefore they were part of the Swiss leaks thing. So that was our first foray into this. And we thought that was pretty cool. There was we have an annual conference that we run twice per year. Once in the fall in San Francisco, and then in the spring in London. And we had one of the people from the ICIJ. They talked about the Swiss leaks. That was 9 months ago in San Francisco in October, and he ended with this picture. Actually, there was some other picture, but it was from Marvel. I couldn't find it now, just on the train over here. But it was a picture from Marvel where he said, "This is not the end." He talked through the entire Swiss leaks thing, and then he talked about, but we're working on something that is much, much bigger now using this graph technology. And of course, what I know now is that this was the Panama Papers. I had no idea. So the Panama Papers, Helena talked about this, and then we've everyone knows what it is. What I think maybe is not get as much credit, or people don't talk as much about, is that this is the biggest leak that we've seen in journalism ever, right? If we compare this to some other famous leaks, we can see that the Panama Papers, it dwarfs in size this. And one of the things that I find particularly interesting is that I've been on the record as saying that I think that if the Panama Papers leak can happen 10 years ago, which could very well have happened. Remember that this is the documents dated from back to the 70s, right? So the leak could have happened 10 years ago. Then there would be 0 stories about that. Why? Because this is a lot of data. I think the technical term for this is a shitload of data, right? And this capability to process big data sets is something that is very non-uniformly spread out throughout mankind today. And what I mean by that is that if you look at the types of organizations that can process huge data sets, it is the Googles and Facebooks, etc. of the world, so big Silicon Valley web firms, right? And they've been forced to build out this huge skill set around processing big data because their business model depends on it. And I think Jan talked through that very, very clearly, right? you need, if you're Google, to be able to manage all this data in order to make money. So therefore, you build up the skill set. And then in recent years, we've learned through Edward Snowden and others that also the big government have these, like the NSA, for example, they also have this skill set to process huge data sets. But that's really it. But in parallel, what's happened over the past 5 years in particular is that there's been this technology stack that have emerged out in the open source, which a lot of people have contributed to. We play a small part of this, right? But we're very proud of it, where this entire infrastructure is being built out in software that allows anyone with $0 to download this and get this entire stack for processing huge data sets. The ICIJ, they have 3 developers. 3 developers. And they made sense out of all of this data, of course, together with many other people, right? But on a technology stack that they didn't have to build themselves. And I think that is really, if we believe that investigative journalism has something to do with making sense of data, and if we believe that journalism is an important kind of power balance in the world, then I think this is a really important story that has not yet been fully told. So what they did then is that they started using our technology for this. This is one example where you see connections emerge, right? This is very big and messy and hard to make sense of, but if you have a technology platform that is centered around connections, you can do that. For example, like the Icelandic Prime Minister, like Sigmundur Gunnlaugsson, or something to that effect, was not immediately directly connected to an offshore account, but he happened to live in the same address as someone also who lived at that address was then connected to an account, right? So multiple hops. And that person then, of course, later turned out to be his wife. So that's one example of where, like, if you just look through a row of these things, that's kind of hard to figure out. But if you have a way to see through the connections, stuff like that becomes obvious. So it's now this entire data set is freely available. You can download it. It's wrapped in a Neo4j database. You can just go to ICIJ's website. You can download it. You get a copy of our database, and you can just start playing around with it, which I think is amazingly cool. So that's about kind of investigating tax fraud, or at least suspicion around tax fraud. But is there a way that we could use this type of technology to prevent it in the first place? It turns out that there is, or at least there are pieces of that puzzle being put together right now, where there's a site called Open Corporates, which is a completely, not connected to any governments or whatever. It's a non-profit that is a way of taking organizational history and organizational ancestry and structure and have a big database as a record of that cross borders, right? So if you go to my company, for example, there's no way that you can go to any record and see how we're structured, because we're a Delaware corporation, right? So our top level organization is an American company, but we own a subsidiary here in Sweden so that we can employ Swedes, and we also got started with that one in Sweden. And there's no way to get a record of that anywhere in the world, right? Except now, organizations like Open Corporates are doing this type of work where they put all of this information into a huge graph database, of course, powered by our graph database, which we love, in order to be able to make sense of this. So this is one example where I went in and I clicked, and this is too small for you to see probably, but this is Goldman Sachs, which is potentially one of my customers. I'm not going to say anything about them, but they have a lot of subsidiaries spread out across very many organizations, very many jurisdictions, and it's prior to Open Corpus, it was impossible to get a coherent and consistent view of that. So that's kind of our story, how a little bit about what we've done with investigative journalism. Just to wrap up, I want to tie back to what Jan said. We think of this very much as we're entering this connected age, right? Where everything in life is becoming increasingly connected. People are becoming more connected. Devices are becoming more connected. Everything is becoming more connected, right? There's a lot of talk about the Internet of Things, right? The fact that every physical object is going to be, or will ultimately be online on the internet, right? And it turns out that when you look into estimations for how the number of connected devices are going to grow, people estimate that by the end of this decade, we're going to have between 50 to 75 billion connected devices in the world, which I think is absolutely amazing. It turns out that 50 to 75 billion is roughly around the same number of neurons as we have in the human brain, which gives us full circle, right? Really, the only way that I believe that we can start making sense of the world around us is by understanding connections. And I hope that we can help make investigative journalism make sense of the world through these connections. And if we can do that, that's a small role that we play in that. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All this sounds wonderful, but do you see any risks when it comes to personal integrity?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, right, the way that we think about this, or the way that I think about this, is that we build a hammer, right? We build a very foundational piece of technology, and you can do amazing things with a hammer, right? You can also hit someone in the head, right? So you can hit it on the head, or you can build a house that people can live in, right? And a lot of people think that it ends there. I personally don't think that as a kind of a technology provider that you get a way out by just saying that. I actually think that I have some amount of responsibility for the way that my tool is being used. So in a sense, if I am a hammer, supplier, and someone starts hitting people on the head with the hammer, I take a small part of that. So I actually do worry about this, because I think that the more powerful this technology becomes, like the more prevalent will it be, and the more prying can it be. At the end of the day, though, I can't not build it, because it also gives all of these amazing, we talked about one thing here, but like it's being used to cure cancer now, right? People couldn't see the connections between proteins before, and now through our technology they can do that, which to me is just very, very satisfying as well. So I end up taking kind of a utilitarian point of view. It's like you look at all of the use cases that we're being used for, and all the good ones get pluses and all the bad ones get minuses. There definitely are minuses, but the pluses end up outweighing the minuses.
But maybe there is a new market. Maybe there is a market for building technology that actually secure your private sphere.
Yeah, I mean, this can also be used for that, right? But so the question is, should we as technology providers not build the technology because it can be used for some bad things? And I think the answer is not clear-cut. It depends on the technology, I think. I've concluded that this leads to so many good things that I will not stop doing it because of some of the bad things that it could potentially be used for.
And also, if you give your database away for free, what do you make money on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll get back to you on that. No, so we actually give away one edition of our database for free, which is awesome if you're one individual and you want to build something, you're a developer, it's completely fully featured. Full featured. But if you're a team, if you work at a big company, you want to put it in production, you want to make sure that you have 5 nines availability, right? So 3 minutes of downtime per year, that type of stuff. Then we have another edition, the Enterprise Edition, which includes all kinds of bells and whistles and clustering and stuff like that. And that is what we charge for.
Thank you so much. Is there any questions? No? Thank you, Emil, and thank you, Helena, very, very much. Well, it sounds like investigative journalism has a great future, actually. You get really happy if you're into that kind of journalism. Now it's time for all of you in this room to try out and get engaged by VR, virtual reality. And we have a few people here from SVT Interactive. And Thomas Strindberg is going to tell you a little bit more about the rest of this afternoon, who is actually going to be an activity. And he has 2 more friends sitting in the back. But you keep your little introduction yourself, Thomas. So give a big hand to Thomas Strindberg.
My name is Thomas Strindberg. I've been headed our virtual reality efforts at SVT together with David Karlsson, some over there. Perhaps this is kind of make you disappointed. This is not really a presentation. It's a brief introduction on a kind of workshop outside that you could be able to test what we have done so far. But I'm going to just give some brief overview on our formats, what we have done, and why. Because the first question, okay, I'm going to try this one. Like, no? Okay, I'm going to do like this instead. Okay. The first question that we asked is, why are we doing this? SVT has always tried to do new things. We have tried to find new ways of storytelling. This is very interesting. How many have tried virtual reality here? Raise your hand. Okay, so it's really many. As you know, it's really interesting, it's really engaging to use virtual reality, and therefore we are trying to find new ways of our storytelling. And as well, we are keen to learn new technique. It's not that hard right now, it was when we started. We are very interested in learning. It turns out one of our first findings was that scripted drama was very interesting to do, but it's very hard, in fact, because the sets where you film in are only one side, and it's all the personnel on the other. So what we did at first was to focus. We tried to stay focused. The first one we wanted to focus was engage. We tried to find ways that people would really find this engagement. We started out building an app, not flat video VR. We focused solely on 3D on the Samsung Gear, and eventually on the Oculus Rift as well. So we built an app that you can download. You can download it now. You can watch everything we have done so far. We did 3 different productions. The first one we did was basically a video on demand. It was a classical concert with computer music called Score. It's very simple to do. The second one was a little bit harder. It was a Swedish version, Musikhjälpen, the Swedish version of Serious Request, I think it is, a Dutch format. We did live broadcasting 24/7 for a week in virtual reality from the studio. That was really hard to do because no one had done that before, as we know. And the third one we did was Melodifestivalen, and that's the qualifying contest for Eurovision Song Contest. Basically, that was the same thing we did with Musikhjälpen, but as everyone in Sweden know, this is the most watched TV show in Sweden by far. So we had our eyes on this effort. Okay, that was then. We urge you afterwards to go outside, test it, and we want to know what you think. We have some findings, but we are really interested. Is this something we should continue doing? What should we do? Yeah, we like for you to come and test and basically tell us what we're trying to do. Me, David, and Henrik, I don't know where you are, we'll be outside there, and please test everything. Discuss it with us, what we should do and what we have done. So this was not really a presentation, it was just that kind of brief overview.
This was excellent, Thomas. You were really good.
Thank you.
You did really good.
Thank you.
So we ask the audience to download the app.
Yeah.
SVT 360.
Yeah.
Yes. And when you go outside, you will get your own glasses, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We order glasses for everyone, so you can all try it. And then come to Thomas, Henrik, eller David, and they will help you out, and you will get your own virtual reality experience. And please give some feedback.
Sure.
thank you so much for this side event. That was everything. Emma, any more? No? You're happy? Good. Thank you so much for coming.